2024, huh? What a year. TV, movies, Comic-Cons that break the internet, and not necessarily in a good way. We got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. I have a confession to make. You know how when you're doing happy birthday on a birthday cake and you start off real big and you don't pay attention to how much room is left, and the next thing that you know, your Y is itty bitty and comedians have made 1,000 jokes about it? Well, I did that, but with my notes, because I had forgotten how much TV and movies had come out this year. And I wanted to kind of give myself a little bit of a cheat sheet so I didn't have to keep looking things up while I was talking about this. And, well, needless to say, I did the birthday thing with my notes. The problem is I'm really bad at doing this. I get distracted. I have a lot of things that are going on. Every time I'm like, oh, I'm back, I'm going to get it. Like, we end up in this situation again, and I have to give some sort of a reason why, and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. But I wanted to talk about this months ago. Like, this was back when we'd first gotten the first looks at the Deadpool trailers around the Super Bowl. Yes, it's July. When I'm recording this, we're at the very, 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 very end of July. And that happened all the way back in February. So if that gives you any sort of an idea of how bad I am at getting things done when I want to get them done, well, now you have an inside scoop. So the biggest reason, it wasn't just Deadpool and Wolverine, which we can get into in a minute because that's all the talk right now because it's the end of July and the movie just came out. And guess what? It's already doubled its original budget just in a weekend, opening weekend. That's bananas, right? But let's rewind a little bit. So there for a while, I was really getting into watching TV and getting caught up on shows and movies that I've been needing to watch and I haven't been getting around to it. So I'd finally set some time aside that I was doing that a little bit here, a little bit there. And man, there was some good stuff this year. I mean, just the stuff that I watched. We have Shogun. There was the Fallout show that came out based off the video game. Doctor Who came back the very first time collaborating with Disney. So that was an experience. There was the X-Men animated series that they brought back. X-Men 97, if you didn't know, that's what it's called. Then we had the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer at the time. Agatha All Along, which I want to talk about a little bit, but we can get into that later. There's been Fortnite stuff going on. I got caught up on Invincible. I discovered the Walking Dead spinoff universe. And that's just the stuff that I was paying attention to. That's just the stuff that I was currently at the time going. I was like, man, there's just so much stuff here that I really, really, really want to talk about. And the problem is some of this stuff, it's been so long. The conversation that I wanted to have is going to be different than the conversation that we're about to have because a lot of stuff has happened over the last, 5 months? So yeah, let's just see where this goes. There's a lot to talk about. And, Comic-Con just happened. People have opinions. So let me just go ahead and rewind it back to what I wanted to originally talk about because 2024 has been an experience so far. Shogun. Ugh. What a show. I did not expect to like that show as much as I did. There were so many people that were talking about it. There was so much going on. And I was just like, normally I'm the type of person that I don't like to get involved in a show that's super popular in the zeitgeist until later on. I'm the person who waited until season 8 of Game of Thrones. And then I binged the entire show 2 weeks before it came out. Just so that I could watch the final season and say that I had experienced it. So I'm that guy. And it's not always the smart thing to do because I do miss out on things every now and then, which Shogun would have been one of those things because I really hadn't planned on watching it, but there was so much press around it. And I just kept seeing trailers for it everywhere I looked. And I was like, I'm kind of curious what this is about. And it's really fascinating because it's based off of a show from the 70s that's based off of a book. And that was fascinating to me. I was like, okay, let's, I'm always curious to see how they translate old stuff, things from the past and present day. And that was one I was like, let's see what they do here. And Again, the conversation that I wanted to have isn't going to be the conversation that we're going to end up having because I'm going to end up breezing through some of this stuff. But let's just say Shogun, mwah, it was just, it was so good. The acting was great. The story was great. The dialogue was great. The tension was great. The action was great. The drama was great. The thrills, the excitement, the adventure, the captivation. It had everything, in my opinion. I thought it was fantastic. And I was so bummed out when I watched the final episode. I have a buddy that I work with that he was also watching it at the time. And I was a little bit ahead of him because I had a problem binging it. I couldn't stop. And he was always a little bit behind. I was like, man, dude, you don't even understand. This last episode broke me. And then the next time, I'm like, dude, you don't even understand. This last episode was bananas. And it would just be like that the entire time. And finally, I was like, dude, have you finished it yet? And he kept telling me, no, I haven't gotten around to it yet. And then, I don't know if he ever did. I don't think he did. But that's fine. I was devastated when it ended because it was so good. You don't see TV like that very often because a lot of the time it's the same old nonsense or it's a lot of, I don't want to criticize necessarily, but you do have a lot of filler and fluff that happens in TV shows and sometimes dialogue that doesn't always land and sometimes stories that don't necessarily make sense and have giant blaring plot holes in them. But yeah, that wasn't one of them. I was actually really impressed with how they did it. And then when I found out that they're getting a season 2, spoiler alert, they're getting a season 2. Yes. Let's go. And I know I'm curious to see what they're going to do because they kind of already did everything that happens in the book that also happened in the previous miniseries. So I'm curious because apparently there's going to be at least 2 more seasons and I am fascinated to see how they're going to do it because it's going to be a little off script. I'm hoping that's not going to hurt the story because that's what happened with Game of Thrones is George R.R. Martin still hasn't finished the books and they didn't have anything to go off of. So they just started kind of going, what happens if this happened? And what happened if this happened? And then you saw season 7 and 8, they were not on the same level that the previous 6 seasons were. And I even kind of like season 7. I don't even hate all of season 8. Like I'd say, even though, what was it, episode 3 or whatever with the giant battle, even though it was super, super dark and a lot of people hate that, like, the entire season, I thought that kind of up until then. I did think that there was a lot of spoiler alerts. If you haven't watched it yet, that's not my fault. There's an entire other spinoff show that's in its 2nd season about to be over already. So if you haven't watched it, that's on you, but you don't have to listen if you don't want to. But there was a lot of payoffs that I don't think necessarily landed. And that's one concern that I might have for Shogun is that they would potentially ruin the sanctity of how good it was because it was a finished work and now they're going to be kind of, whose line is it anywaying it? So hopefully that still ends up being good. And then Fallout was the next thing that I got into, and it's good to see that Hollywood's getting the idea when it comes to adapting things that they're like, oh, maybe we should be kind of faithful to these adaptations and not just like, oh, it's loosely based off of this thing that's an idea that someone had that we decided that we wanted to do differently, because it doesn't work most of the time. And there's a lot of hated video game movies, and yeah, I don't think there were really many series that took place before The Last of Us, really. So The Last of Us kind of got the point across to Hollywood. And then I thought, man, I was actually really impressed with what Fallout did, because it could have been terrible and it could have been kind of cheesy, but I thought that it was actually really well done. I was actually really invested. I thought the twists and turns that took place in it were really interesting. I was so obsessed with the ghoul. I thought he was such a fascinating character. The lead, she was so good. Like, just the fact that she was able to just capture that just pure innocence so well, but also like she felt real. Like, she didn't feel like someone that was like, oh, I am reacting to things that are happening around me. It was like they were really happening to her. And I thought it was so good. And the ending, I'm not going to give that away because I don't think endings should really be given away unless it's been a very long time and you've had plenty of time to watch it. It hasn't been that long, so I'll spare you. But the ending, didn't expect that. Didn't necessarily see that coming. I saw bits of it coming, but I was actually super surprised with that. I'll be honest, X-Men 97, I didn't really get a chance to watch it because my thing is I watched bits and pieces of the old show in the 90s because we didn't actually have access to like cable or satellite at the time. We grew up and we just kind of got like really crappy signal from the 4 channels that our antenna picked up. Yeah, antenna. If you've never heard of one of those, it was a terrible way to watch TV. Be happy that streaming exists. I'm sure there's people out there that are my age and older who understand the struggle. The same thing with the internet. It was awful. But like I wanted to watch the whole thing in its fullness. And like I said, I was caught up at Fallout. I was caught up with Shogun. I was pretty deep into Fortnite. So I did not have the time to watch the show before the continuation came out. So I'm not as hip on it. So I'm not really going to talk about it, but I've heard great things and I do plan on watching it. And maybe one of these days we'll talk about it because I'm curious to see if there's parts of it that play into Deadpool and Wolverine that I'm maybe not aware of because I didn't watch it. But that's okay. It'll be around for a while, and I can just get around to watching it then. Moving on, the one thing that I do want to talk about that I was actually like, I was torn. Doctor Who. Doctor Who coming back. I love Doctor Who. I remember being a kid and accidentally stumbling upon it when I was flipping through the channels and not knowing what it was called or remembering what channel that it was on, and occasionally finding it late at night, slipping through the channels and watching an episode here or there back when Christopher Eccleston was Doctor Who. And he introduced me to the world. I know the graphics can be cheesy and sometimes it's a silly show, but I don't know. It pulls me in every single time. You know, David Tennant is my favorite. Disney reeled me in, bringing him, spoiler alert, back for the specials that they did at the end of last year. Man, it made me so happy to see him again. And then I really like the new Doctor. I really do. I enjoy the performance. I enjoy the take that they have on Doctor Who. I enjoyed the episodes. I thought most of them were pretty strong. I don't know. I was torn because there were some episodes that I felt just like there wasn't as much sustenance to them as much as just like somebody trying to get a point across, which that's fine. But sometimes I think biased writing sometimes can affect the story. So, you know, there was the episode with the bomb. I thought that one was, I don't know, it seemed a little mean for Doctor Who, if I'm being honest. Like the Doctor Who that I'm used to, you know, he's hopeful and joyful and, you know, he's optimistic and, you know, he's always trying to like do the best that he can so that nobody dies. Nobody dies. That's the one thing that Christopher Eccleston taught me. Nobody dies. This time, nobody dies. And he always tries to do that. He always tries to make sure that everybody gets out of it in one piece, even if it's the little monster that's involved in it or the bad alien or the villain of the story. And he was just, I felt he was really harsh. It didn't feel like the Doctor to me. So that was an episode. I thought the Space Babies episode was a weird episode. Didn't necessarily. I loved the episode. Spoiler alert, I'm sorry. I loved the episode where those slug creatures were eating everybody. I thought that. You know what that felt like? That felt like Blink. That felt like not classic Doctor Who, because I'll be honest, I haven't watched all of classic Doctor Who. I've watched little bits and pieces. I tried to start from the very beginning. It's really rough and hard to get into. I do want to do it though, so that I can say that I am a true Who fan. But New Who, I've watched all of it, every single bit of it. Even Jodie Whittaker. I didn't think Jodie Whittaker was that bad. I think a lot of people are mean for no reason with her, and that's fine. I mean, I understand reasons behind it, but also I thought that the performance was really good most of the time. The episode with the slugs, I love that episode so very much. I thought the ending was solid. I thought the finales that they came up with, even though I felt like there was some plot holes in them, you know, that's the problem when you end up with different writers with different takes, is sometimes I feel like the lore can get a little muffled or sometimes get a little bit wibbly wobbly and not necessarily always make sense or always, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like it's disconnected from the rest of the show. But then you have episodes like the one with the slugs. I can't remember the name of these episodes. I'm not even going to try. The finale I thought was pretty good for the most part. And then I really even enjoyed the episode with the music. I don't remember what the name of any of these episodes are. My brain is just blanking completely. But I thought those were really solid episodes. I thought they were really fascinating. I thought that they had some really solid villains. They did some more really good world building, I thought. They introduced some new stuff because I'll be honest, sometimes I get tired of seeing Cybermen and Daleks. I'll be honest. Sometimes I'm like, can we do something different? This has been your main antagonist. And I understand that the Daleks are the sworn enemy of Doctor Who, blah, 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 blah. But can we do something else? And that's what I really do like. The one thing that I really did enjoy about it was that, I felt like this season did a pretty good job of keeping it fresh. Like I said, there was some interesting choices that were made. Maybe not necessarily all great ones. Like, the one thing that I really like about Russell T Davies is I think that he does a really pretty solid job of world building and expanding and lore building. I don't know if those are the words necessarily, but I thought that was really solid. Yeah. I mean, overall, I'd say Doctor Who working with Disney. Like I said, I thought some of the episodes were a little preachy. I thought some of them that he didn't necessarily feel like the Doctor because maybe he was a little, I don't know. I mean, the Doctor's always had moments where he's angry or times where he's had to be harsh in the moment. But there's a couple episodes I was just like, man, it just feels like that's all you're doing is kind of being an asshole. Honestly, that's kind of how it felt. And I don't know what the motivation the actor was doing for those moments. I could kind of understand annoyance. I can understand the one thing that I really thought was really fascinating is, you had the episode where he's like, I could save you. And that was such an emotional, such a solid performance.
Just allow me to save your lives.
And then it was just the lady was like, I believe in this. And he was just like, oh, wow. I was like, that seemed unnecessary. It just seemed like spitefulness to be spiteful.
Prove it.
What, seriously? Now you need proof. Faith Giao.
And maybe that's just me. Moving on. I don't want to keep dwelling on that. But Doctor Who, I thought was, for its return with the new Doctor, with Disney, I was actually fairly happy with how it turned out. I mean, it's not perfect. It's still, I'm a little biased. A little bit. So, it's really hard for people to compare to the seasons that had Doctor 10 and 11. I mean, David Tennant is so good. And then Matt Smith. If you've seen House of the Dragon, Matt Smith doesn't play around. And it's nothing against this actor. I felt like those were so cohesive because the writing and the acting were just so perfect for each other. That makes any sense. Who knows? Maybe I'll cut some of this out. I don't even know. But I don't want to keep dwelling on that. So we had Shogun, we had Fallout, we had Doctor Who. So far, things moving along. I was actually really impressed. I was actually really happy with my TV viewing experience in 2024. I discovered the Walking Dead spinoff universe, and I knew that they were coming. I knew that they were doing it. But see, my problem is I really enjoyed The Walking Dead. And I even stuck around after the whole Negan thing, after everybody was like, I'm done with this show. They took it too far, blah, blah, blah. Well, that happens in the comics. The only thing that I thought that they did a terrible job with, which is another reason a lot of people were very angry, was the bait and switch. I didn't think that was the way to handle that. And I understand, Glenn, the actor that plays Glenn, I know his name. Hold on one second. We're going to get this name pulled right up. I didn't even have to look it up. I feel dumb. But anyway, I know Steven Yeun, who played Glenn. I know that he'd always said that he wanted to be the one that did that scene, and I respect that. But I didn't think that it's not actually Glenn. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, I don't know how you haven't yet. It's been forever since that's been on TV. But spoiler alert, it's Abraham. I didn't think that was the way to go about it because you were like, oh, it's Abraham. Everyone was like, oh, crap, it's Abraham. No, not Abraham. And then they're like, surprise, it's still Glenn anyway. And they're like, oh, really? Why did you do that? That's where adaptation comes very important, because if you start taking civil liberties with things, suddenly you start having storylines that people aren't fans of, and they go, that's not how it was. That's not how things are supposed to be, blah, 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 blah. And some of it's justified, but sometimes people just whine to whine. But I watched it all the way through because I was like, I've invested myself this far. I just want to see how it ends. And it doesn't end anything like the comics, in case you were wondering. If we're being honest, some of the characters that are at the ending of the comics aren't in the show at that point. And if you watch the show, you know who I'm talking about. And if you haven't, well, go back and watch it. You'll find out who I'm talking about. Or Google it, whatever works for you. But they had plans to make these spin-off shows. There was one for Daryl called Daryl Dixon. There was one for Negan and Maggie, and it was called Dead City. And then they had the final one, which was the one with Rick and Michonne. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't remember what that one's even called, because I didn't get that far. I think I finished. I'll be honest, I vaguely remember the ending of Dead City, because I watched Daryl Dixon. I thought it was, the one thing I thought was fascinating about that show is that they actually did it in someplace outside of the United States. Like, that's one thing that I thought was really interesting about the beginning of Fear the Walking Dead, is it was like, oh, you get to see how it started, but also we're in Mexico now. And this one was cool because you were like in Europe, you were in France. I don't know, I didn't think that it was that solid overall. I thought some of the writing lacked. It was interesting. And, if it got a second season, I probably would have watched it just because I was curious. I don't know if it's getting one. I know Dead City's getting one. I thought that was pretty good. I enjoyed it. But I'm a big Jeffrey Dean Morgan fan, so I'm a little biased. And actually, I also love Laura Cohen. She's great. I watched her all the way back on Supernatural, and I was like, this girl's good. And so I was really happy when I saw her on The Walking Dead, even though it wasn't the person that I wanted her to be, but that's okay. She'll always be Bella to me. But that show was really good. I'm really curious about the Rick and Michonne one. I've heard it's good. I haven't heard bad things about it, so I'm assuming that means it's good. I do want to watch it at some point, but it's just, there's too much TV. There's too many movies. Like, okay, this is a list that I made. This is the happy birthday list that I was talking about. I have one for movies that came out, or movies that are coming up. I have one for TV shows, and then I have one that's like stuff that's already come out. And just this year, the stuff that's already come out, on top of the stuff that I talked about, you've also had Garfield, you had Despicable Me 4, you had If, Furiosa, Mean Girls, Godzilla x Kong, you had the new Quiet Place movie, there's Madam Web, there's Monkey Man, Civil War, Dune Part 2, Imaginary, Bad Boys 4, Civil War, Abigail, Fall Guys, The Kingdom for the Planet of the Apes, Kung Fu Panda 4, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, you had Twisters, and Inside Out 2. Oh, and did I say Deadpool and Wolverine? And that's the highlights. And then TV, like, there was other stuff that came out too. That's not just the stuff that I was watching. There's too much. Like, it's so hard to get caught up. I'm so behind because I go through periods where all I watch is YouTube. And there'll be periods where all I do is play just random video games. And there'll be periods where I'm really invested in writing, or I'm really invested in editing, or I'm really invested with napping, whatever it may be. I'm trying to fit things around time with my son and work and the gym, and it's not easy. And then I'm trying to fit in viewing on top of that. Like right now, I've just started watching Samurai Jack because it'd been forever since I watched it, since I was a kid. Not gonna lie, it's not as amazing as I remember, but it still slaps. Obviously, you see things differently when you're a kid. Like Power Rangers doesn't hit the same way unless we're talking about the movie. That movie, it's a work of art. And I'm not talking about the new one that they made. I'm talking about the old one where they had the cheesy rubber suits and they became ninjas. It's so good. Even though the CGI sucks, it's so terrible. But I love that movie. It hits so good. But I've tried going back and watching the show. It's just too childified. And I respect the Power Rangers community, and I think like the comics and stuff are fascinating. Like I really like the whole storyline with Lord Draken. I'm probably not saying that right. There's gonna be Power Rangers fans yelling at me, and that's fine. You're allowed to do that. But I'm pretty sure it's Lord Draken. I swear I've heard them say that, but maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, so sometimes stuff from your childhood doesn't necessarily hit the same, which is another reason why I haven't quite made it to X-Men 97, because I'll be honest, I did watch like the first 2 episodes, and it's just my problem is maybe I have ADHD. I don't know. My brain just can't focus because I get obsessed with things, and then I'm going, I don't want it no more. Like I'll listen to a song until I absolutely hate it, and I'll skip it every single time it comes up in my playlist after that. Before that, I listened to it at least 2,000 times. So I'm like that with TV and movies too. I mean, I did watch some of the TV and movies that came out. Okay, so like, let me see. I wanted to check out Madam Web so secretly, like I've said, I'm rooting against Sony. I hope all of their properties fail and it ends up back at Marvel, because I hate that what they've done with Spider-Man's universe. Not just Spider-Man. I mean, I think most of the movies that they made with Spider-Man have been pretty good. The best ones, obviously, were early on, and then they started getting crazy, which is what I don't know what it is. They can make like a really solid first one, and then they're like, let's just go bonkers with it. Like the first 2 Tobey Maguire ones were really good. The third one, I don't know what was going on with that movie. And then you had the first Amazing Spider-Man. I thought that was good. I liked the lizard and all that. But then you had the next one, and they were like, Rhino, who's not Rhino, who's really a robot, Paul Giamatti. And I was like, this isn't Rhino. Like, you should have gotten Brock Lesnar and not Paul. And then they were like, hey, by the way, let's go ahead and throw in this random moldy Green Goblin for some reason. He wasn't necessary. You could have saved him for the third movie. And they were like, we need some dramatic part to this movie, so let's go ahead and kill him a stone. It was like, you could have waited to do this in the last movie. Like, that would have even been interesting motivation to see, like, if you started the movie like that, and then you're like, oh, crap, what's going to happen now? And then the Tom Holland ones, I mean, the first 2 aren't as interesting. I really love Michael Keaton. I mean, I actually really enjoy Tom Holland. I think that he captures both Peter Parker and Spider-Man very well. But I don't know, there wasn't a whole lot of Spider-Maning in that movie. It was a whole lot of Breakfast Club. And that's cool, but I wanted to see more Spider-Maning. And all he did was get chaperoned by Iron Man most of the movie. And that kind of bummed me out. The second one I thought was a lot better because I actually really enjoyed what they did with Mysterio, and I thought it was an interesting story. Yeah, I'd say it set things up pretty interesting for the third one. I was gonna say it didn't really have too much of an effect, but no, he was still kind of like villainized for a majority of the movie, and it was a big part of that. And I've always argued that he was the 6th member of the Sinister Six, because you had Doc Ock, you had Green Goblin, you had Electro, you had Sandman, you had the Lizard, and then I think the 6th one was Mysterio, because he kind of screwed Peter Parker for the rest of the movie. Like, he was kind of the unsung 6th member that nobody talks about. Definitely wasn't Venom. He was not necessary for that movie. I've seen Ghostbusters. I thought that was decent. It wasn't as good as the first one that they made, I didn't think. Kung Fu Panda, I got halfway through it and fell asleep. It's not because it was a bad movie. I was just really tired. I need to go back and finish it. I really wanted to see Twisters. Inside Out 2, not quite as strong as the first one, but it still made me feel feelings, which, is the point of the movie. Godzilla times Kong, I expected to hate that movie, and it was actually better than I thought it was going to be. I still want to see Godzilla -1. And then Shin Godzilla, I've heard really great things about both of those movies. They're both completely different experiences from what I've been told, because Miss Aline's husband is a fanatic when it comes to Godzilla. And that's good, because it's interesting, because I know nothing about that universe. So it's kind of cool to be like, which ones are good? Even though he doesn't like the one with Matthew Broderick. And I kind of actually low-key enjoy that movie. I mean, granted, maybe you shouldn't have called it Godzilla, because it's really not Godzilla, and I can see why people would be upset with it. But I still enjoyed that movie. If they would have called it something else, I think people would have liked it a little bit. I think it was just like, that's not my Godzilla, and that's fine. I still enjoyed the movie. And he doesn't like that movie, but that's okay. He told me that the other two movies, or I've heard that he really thought that they were great. And that's good because I'm always in the market for something new. If was disappointing, I actually really like John Krasinski. I think that he's a really amazing actor. I think that he's a solid writer for the most part. I think that, is a good director. I mean, I thought that the movie had potential. I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. And there were parts in the movie I would maybe miss like one little detail and I would be confused. Like there's the whole scene where, like, spoiler alert, there's the scene where the retirement house turns into this crazy imagination land. And I was like, did I miss something? Why is this even happening? And I think that I did, but also, like, maybe it should be less subtle or maybe a more noticeable line because this is supposed to be for kids. This episode is brought to you by Miss Celine. If you're a fan of DIY projects, crafts, let's play sessions, and spunky personalities, then this channel is the place for you. We truly appreciate her for being a part of this channel and encourage you to check out hers. Now back to the episode. I actually loved the new Quiet Place movie. That movie, I actually felt like fear. Not like, oh no, I'm so scared, but like I felt the tension. Like I felt like the first one really like entered me into that world, and it really helped. Like, I know that it made people leave the movie going, oh, I'm making too much noise. But the one thing that I actually really enjoyed about this one is, like, not only you got to see how things work, but like there were a lot of like new components to it because you're in New York City, like the loudest city. Like at the beginning of the movie, they tell you that it just constantly makes a noise, and it's a stat. I haven't looked it up to verify it, but it says that it's at the same level as a constant scream, which I thought was, clever for the movie. But I will say this, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. It's not a massive spoiler, but it is a little bit of a spoiler. There is no way that cat should have survived that movie. That cat was the loudest cat I've ever heard in my life, and that cat was fine all the time. And it didn't make any sense to me. There were people who made less noise than that cat, and that cat was fine the entire time. And I understand not wanting to kill animals in movies, but also that cat was loud and should have died. And there's no way that those things would not have murdered that cat. Not a chance. But that's just my opinion. And there's several other ones on here that I want to see. I mean, Twisters was one that I really wanted to see in 4DX, but I just didn't get around to seeing it. From what I've heard, it's actually really good and a great experience. And I've heard by several people that think it's better than the original. But, I don't know. People have their opinions. I really don't know what's going on. I really hope I do get to see it in theaters before it gets out, because I feel like that would be an experience more than just watching it on my TV at home. That's one thing I love about the movie theater. I think some things deserve an experience. And I believe that, like when I went and watched Deadpool the first time, Deadpool and Wolverine, it was really good. But then when I watched it on an IMAX, man, that was a whole different experience. It made that movie come to life. I really enjoyed it so much more on IMAX. So I think that some things are worth the experience. And that's the one great thing about watching some movies in theaters. Because some movies, let's be honest, there's a reason that Disney used to do direct to video. That's a thing for a reason. Because some things, maybe a sequel to The Little Mermaid in the 90s isn't going to be as good as the original because they're like, hey, cash grab. And sometimes movies don't deserve to be in theaters. I'd be completely honest with that. Sometimes really good movies, I don't think. Like, I'll be honest, like, I watched Garfield with my son, and although it was like, cute and stuff, like, I didn't really like it as much as I liked the live action ones, even though I don't understand why they didn't computer animate Odie in those movies like they did Garfield. I'll never understand why they used some random dog that looks nothing like Odie to be Odie. But I will say, I'll be honest, I like those movies more. And for some reason, I don't know why they keep casting Chris Pratt and then he doesn't change his voice at all for any of these characters. Like, I enjoyed Super Mario, but it was very distracting that he sounded so much like Chris Pratt. And then this one, I loved Garfield, but it was so distracting that it was like, I'm like, this is Chris Pratt. And like, that's fine. Like, granted, Bill Murray didn't change his voice that much, but he sounds so much like the old Garfield. Chris Pratt doesn't. He doesn't. And I love Chris Pratt. I think he's a great actor. But also, maybe he's not the person that should be every role. Just my opinion. You know, you don't have to agree. That's fine. That's why we all have these things called opinions. You know, it's how we feel and what we think. It's not necessarily fact. You know, so moving on. Honestly, I'm looking ahead and I'm really curious because I feel like overall 2024 has been pretty solid, like when it comes to like movies and TV. Because normally I feel like one suffers. Like you either get really amazing television and really terrible movies, or you get stellar movies and really not good TV. And I feel like we've been getting a really good amount of both this year. It really feels that way. I mean, like I said, you have your duds. I've heard nothing but terrible things about Madam Web. I've heard people laugh constantly about how terrible that movie is. You have what was that? If was disappointing, which I didn't think it was going to be because it looked really good. I didn't know why Mean Girls needed a reboot. I thought the first one was fine. Apparently they needed more singing in it. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I liked the first one. I thought the first one was the original was really, really good. But, you know, I mean, every once in a while, I guess they just need to reboot things for whatever reason. Kung Fu Panda, not as solid from what I remember as some of the earlier iterations. But, I mean, I didn't finish it, so don't completely take my word for it. But then, like, you had, you know, really good TV on top of that. Like, you had good movies because Dune Part 2, I heard nothing but good things about. Godzilla x Kong was really good. A Quiet Place was amazing. I'm not going to lie, I haven't seen it, but that Abigail vampire movie looked really fantastic. Twisters, I've heard nothing but good about. Inside Out, I mean, like I said, people said it's not as good as the first one, but it's hard. It's really hard to make a movie that's as good as the original. It just is. But, you know, I think that the overall, like, I've heard really good things about the movies that have come out. And then we have other ones coming up that, like, people seem pumped about. Like, the new Alien movie looks terrifying. I'll be honest. I've never, ever felt anything but intrigue watching those movies. Like, I've never been, like, scared or, like, even thrilled. Like, it's not like, you know, like that, like, when you're walking through your house late at night and you go, there could be somebody behind me or in that shower curtain. You have that little bit of a heart murmur. I actually felt that during the trailers. I feel like it's actually going to be one of the best ones. This is an unpopular opinion. I didn't like the first one, the original. I thought that it was very slow, very, very slow, almost unnecessarily so. There was some interesting moments. It established some lore. It did a little bit of world building. But other than that, I was not that interested in that movie. Not even a little bit. I thought it was okay. I don't think it's the masterpiece that people think that it is. I think that there's maybe a little bit of nostalgia that's kicking in there. Just like I used to think that like Power Rangers was amazing. And I used to argue with my brother when he would go, oh, that's just Voltron, but they just redid it. And I was like, no, it's not. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I think there's a little bit of nostalgia that kicks in there. I feel like the James Cameron one is actually better. I feel like it's probably the best one. Like, the third one's silly, really silly. The Resurrection one had its cool moments, but it was really weird because it did the whole cloned Ripley crap that people weren't super... And it was a weird performance. I didn't mind... Oh, what was that? Prometheus, I didn't mind Prometheus, even though I didn't really see the connection to it other than the very end, which, you know, I guess that's enough. I haven't seen the last couple since then, so maybe those are really good, and I don't know. But I think this next one's going to be solid. People really seem to be super pumped for the new Beetlejuice movie. Beetlejuice, don't say it one more time or he'll show up. But people seem really pumped for that movie, and it looks like it's going to be fun. And it looks really awesome that he's doing a lot of the stuff that he did in the original movie with a lot of like the practical effects. Even some of the computer animated stuff, like in the trailer where the people start getting sucked into their phones, I actually thought that looked pretty good. And Tim Burton's always hit or miss for me. There's some movies of his that I love. And Beetlejuice is one of those movies that I love. I think Beetlejuice is like top 3 Tim Burton movies for sure. Definitely not Nightmare Before Christmas. Fight me. But anyway, that movie looks really good. The new Joker movie looks really good. I'm not a big musical fan, so I'm curious to see how I feel about it if I actually watch it. I've heard a lot of people laugh at this and joke about it, but the more I see trailers for it, the more I'm like, I kind of want to see this movie. The new Red One movie with The Rock and Chris Evans, I mean, it just looks fun. I mean, when I watch movies, I'm not always looking for Academy Award winners. I'm not always even looking for solid scripts. My thing is like, when I watch movies and TV, it's because I don't want to use my brain. That's what video games are for. And that's why I'm not a gamer. Because when I like to relax, I like to stop using my brain because I use it so much during the day in everything that I have to do that when it comes to relaxing, I want to turn it off. And sometimes just a fun movie or a silly TV show is what you need. And people are like, oh, we just have to dissect everything and pick it apart and tell you all the reasons that it wasn't shot well and the acting wasn't great and the cinematography could have been better and the lighting was poor and this and that and blah, 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 blah. And we've grown up in such a, ever since you, and there's nothing wrong with this, but we've just become so, we've turned into a review culture almost. Like everybody is a film snob now. And I don't say that condescendingly. I don't say that like, oh, being like a film critic or an expert or even, you know, appreciating those things. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I am saying that like it's critique culture. That's what we've turned into. And sometimes it gets too much. Like there's I think that opinions and like blogs and exposés, like things like that, I think that's fine. Like it's one thing I heard on a show that I was watching and he said, I'm a pundit, not a reporter. And I was like, you know what? I actually like that. I respect that you're not over here trying to give like a full on critique and review. And he did, but I'm like I appreciate people that approach it from an opinion standpoint and not like this is film fact. And I am the guru of film understanding and critiquing. And I think opinions are fine. And that's why I keep saying that, you know, my stuff's an opinion. Like there are people who think Nightmare Before Christmas is one of the best movies that they've ever made. I hate it. I hate that movie. I think that it's very overrated. I don't think that it stands up. But people love that movie and you're allowed to, as long as you don't make me watch it. And I think that's fine. But people get so caught up in this critique culture and so many people have turned YouTube into their job. I feel like they have to have like a certain take on things to be relevant. And you know, there's a channel that I've talked about before, Real Rejects. I really appreciate them because they just say how they feel. They don't go, this is how it is. This movie's hot garbage. I mean, sometimes they do. But for the most part, they approach things as like, this is our opinion. This is how we feel. And I really appreciate that when they do like chats and streams and stuff like that, that they go, you know, you're allowed to like this or you're allowed to hate this. You're fine. Like, it's okay if you disagree with us. And I appreciate that because we live in such a society that that's not the norm. We live in a society where if you don't agree with me, that you're wrong or you're the enemy. And that stuff, that bickering back and forth gets old and it's not necessary. And I don't think that's what the purpose of, film entertainment even is. I think that it's to entertain us, to distract us, and maybe teach us something or have us walking away pondering questions or seeing things in a new way, or maybe sometimes just leaving us with wonder and just a sparkle in our eye because we're like, oh wow, that was incredible. And that's how we go to Deadpool and Wolverine. You see that transition? I got there slowly but surely, but here we are, Deadpool and Wolverine, and I'm slow at editing things. I mean, obviously it took 4 months for me to even record this, so Who knows how long Deadpool and Wolverine will be out by the time that this gets posted. And who knows if the 7 people that listen to it will have not already seen it. But I'm going to get into some spoilers, and I don't care. That movie was phenomenal. It was really enjoyable. I mean, I probably won't get into super spoilers just because maybe I'll make another video, like my full experience. This is kind of a 2024 overview. I don't know why I've been making overview videos lately. It's just like, oh, the year so far. Hasn't it been fascinating? Like, I think the last one that I made was about last year's summer and how fascinating it was with Barbie and Spider-Man and all that good stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you look like 2 videos down, you'll see that exact video that I'm talking about. But I'll probably get into it more because I don't know. I feel like I want to watch it one more time because I had so many opinions in that movie, and I feel like maybe some of them, in my lack of sleep, have not mixed together very well, and so maybe I would like to be like super fresh after watching it. But that movie was so great. I felt like the cameos that were in it, and then I heard somebody talk about how a lot of them were like actually supporting actors and, you know, whatever you want to call them. The surprise appearances that we may or may not have seen coming, I thought was really great. And spoiler alert, one of them was Blade. I actually did not see that coming. As much as I had heard about the beef between him and Ryan Reynolds on the set of Blade 3, there was no way. When he walked out on that screen, I actually went, no way he's in this movie, out loud. I could not believe when he walked out on screen because I was like, I thought they hated each other. But, you know, as adults, it looks like they probably squashed that beef. But I could not believe it when he walked out. Elektra, I'd heard a lot about Elektra. And then I actually really expected things with Channing Tatum. Like, I didn't know for sure. But I was like, there's no way they're going to overlook the fact this dude tried to get a movie made for 10 years. So I figured that he would be in it in some way. I didn't think he would have as much of a role as he did, I'll be honest. But I did think that he would be in it somehow. There were a couple others that I kind of expected to be in it. Some maybe that necessarily didn't get a fair shake in some of the other movies. Like there was a lot of talk about Darwin coming back. And I thought that would have been a really cool cameo to see because he's the guy that adapts to everything and he gets murdered like instantly. So, you know, there's that whole justice for Darwin. And I thought that would have been cool to see him in it. I think it would have been really cool to see some of the other X-Men. I've heard a couple people talk that they think that those X-Men were in this movie and maybe they got cut because they might be coming back for the Secret Wars movie. So we'll see. If they don't, I'm going to be like, why weren't they in this? It sure seemed like Halle Berry might be in this movie with her posting pictures with white hair, and she never had that since Storm. So whatever reason that she did that, she sure did take everybody off the trail. And if it wasn't for that movie, I'm curious what the reason was. And maybe that's real. Maybe they did have to cut that, and it's going to end up coming back later on. I thought it would have been cool to see some of the other characters. I mean, not necessarily X-Men. I thought they really gave the X-Men a pretty solid, like, hey, good job, guys. But it would have been cool maybe to see, like, a Ghost Rider, which I've heard people's opinions on why they didn't think he was in it, and maybe he'll be in Secret Wars. Or maybe even a Punisher. That would have probably been cool since it seemed like they had one of his villains in it. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Secret Wars. If they end up paying a lot of this stuff off, I'll forgive it. But otherwise, I'll be like, man, that was kind of a missed opportunity. I mean, I even heard people talking about Spider-Man might be in this movie. And although I didn't necessarily think that he needed to be, because it's Sony, and this was kind of a Fox movie. Like, hey, bye, Fox. We miss you. You were such a great experience for us. I thought that Hugh Jackman killed it. I thought that his portrayal of Logan in this movie was one of his best. I mean, he made me feel things. And, you know, even though you didn't get to see as much exposition with him, that would have made you, like, feel things a little bit more, which I can agree with some people I've heard make that point. I just thought the movie overall was good. And I still felt those things. Like, he made me feel when he was tearing up talking to one of the other cameos. Spoiler alert. X-23, if you didn't know that, you didn't watch the last trailer, and that's on you. But when he was talking to her and he's all tearing up, it was just like, man, dude, I feel that. Like, because, even though he's not our Wolverine, like you are so invested in our Wolverine that you can just kind of like push that over onto him and you can just connect with him that way. Just like the thing we're going to talk about at Comic-Con, I think you might be able to do with that character too. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I really enjoyed that movie. Like when I watched it the first time, up until the spoiler alert, up until the Wolverine cameos that they did, all of the montage that they did with the different Wolverines, I was struggling. I was tired. Granted, I was really tired. I wasn't planning on watching it, but I was like, I don't want to get any spoilers, and I don't know if I can wait any longer. Because I was really supposed to go watch it on that Saturday, and I was like, I just can't wait anymore. So I went and watched it on that Thursday when it came out. And I was struggling with it at first, but then like I really got into it, and I really enjoyed it. But then, I don't know, maybe that's why I think maybe I was tired, because when I watched it again on the IMAX, man, it really hit so much harder. And I really enjoyed like all of it. Like I wasn't sitting there like going, man, this is kind of dragging on. Like what's going on? Like it was so eventful at the beginning of this movie and now we're just dragging. I didn't feel that the second time. I'm curious to see what a third time would be. I really, really want to watch it in a large crowd, because so far both of the crowds that I've watched it in are like late night showings, and there's been like people, but not as many people. And even though the last one that I went to had way more like reactions, like I want to experience that like in-game reaction that like you saw the people freaking out in those movies and the giant crowds. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be a part of that, because this movie was amazing. The beginning, I loved it so much. And I don't know why I was really feeling his dance number. I was like, yeah, Deadpool, go, bro, let's do it. Like it got, I don't know, it was just like the way it's doing it was like getting me pumped up, because I'm like, this is the movie. Like since No Way Home, this is the first movie I've gotten this pumped up for. It'd been a while, because for the longest time, I just assumed that like the movies were just going to be kind of mediocre. And like, I didn't hate Ant-Man and Wasp, but I felt like it was a missed opportunity. If they would have gone through with either killing and or stranding Ant-Man and or Wasp, I feel like that would have been more impactful. Maybe they could have salvaged this whole Kang thing that they were doing after Comic-Con. Maybe that's not necessarily what they're doing anymore, which I have an opinion. I hope I don't forget it. And I really hope I don't forget it, because it's something that Kamala Khan, or not, what am I saying? That's the character. Aban Vellani, the actress who plays Miss Marvel, she had a theory, which I was like, that was my theory. So, I mean, it's kind of cool. Like, she's a big comic nerd, so I guess it made me feel good that she had the same opinion. If it happens, I'm going to be like, I came up with that. And she also came up with that. I'm not saying either one of us stole it from the other, but I'll get into that in a minute. I really hope I don't forget it. But going back to that, like, I thought it was I don't know. I just really, really enjoyed what they did with it compared to the other ones, because, you know, they didn't go through with what they had talked about. There were rumors and maybe even like reshoots to not go through with what they did with Ant-Man. Thor, Gore was not the Gore from the comics. He did like zero killing, which I thought made him an even lamer villain. It would have been fascinating if that movie would have gotten a rated R. Maybe there would have been less kids in it that were not necessary to the plot of the movie, really. Then you could have also had, I haven't seen the Marvels, but I haven't heard good things about them. A lot of the TV shows have been kind of like Moon Knight was interesting, but it wasn't like, oh, this is amazing. She-Hulk, I was actually getting really into it until the end of She-Hulk, and I was like, that's too much. Like, you guys broke the wall way too much and kind of ruined what I thought would have been a really cool ending. And they were like, let's just talk about it. I was like, I don't want you to talk about it. You guys are Hulk. Smash some stuff. But it's whatever. Like, I feel like I haven't been this pumped for a movie since No Way Home, honestly. Like, it's been a very, very long time. So I was actually like, I couldn't wait. I really couldn't. Like, and there's not really anything coming up anytime soon that's going to make me feel, I mean, obviously I'm curious about Captain America. I'm curious about the Thunderbolts, and I am really interested to see what the Fantastic Four is going to be like, because we've gotten two different versions of them. So I'm curious what this version is going to be. and how accurate to the comics it's going to be and how different from the previous people who have played these characters it's going to be. So that I'm actually really fascinated by. And that brings us to Comic-Con, another transition that I wasn't expecting to make like that. But hey, guess what? We're here and I did it. Aren't you proud? So those movies got revealed at Comic-Con. Then there were rumors going around that the Russo brothers were coming back, and they revealed that at Comic-Con. And the Russo brothers are coming back to film the next 2 Avengers movies. They're the ones that made Infinity War and Endgame, if you don't know. And people love those movies. People are like, oh, things have gone downhill since Endgame. That's how much they love those movies. Those movies were like, oh, the Avengers assembled, man. Anyway, so they revealed that Avengers Secret Wars is still happening. It's coming out in May 2027. They didn't change the date or anything on that. Then Avengers 5 was originally called Kang Dynasty. But then Jonathan Majors got himself in some trouble, if you haven't heard. And they were like, oh, I guess we got to recast Kang. But then I guess there were rumors, or there was talks that they were already going to, because he wasn't testing well with audiences because he got beaten by ants and he wasn't as powerful of a character as they were trying to set him up to be, which, there were some missed opportunities. I think that they could have course corrected on that, and maybe they still will. And that's what brings me to the Iman Vellani thing. She had a theory, and I had the same one. I was like, if they use Kang as the character from the Secret Wars comics, there's a character called Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, and he's like this being who's the same in every single universe, and he's essentially a bomb of energy that's been planted there by these beings called the Beyonders, and the Beyonders are trying to use them to destroy universes, and essentially God King Doom, which he's still Victor Von Doom at the time, he ends up absorbing their powers, and then he absorbs the power of the Beyonders, and he becomes this all-powerful being called God King Doom. And she made the point that she thought that they were going to make Kang the Molecule Man character, and that he would kill him, all of his variants, and absorb their energy. And I was like, that's exactly, like when people were making such a big deal about Kang being the villain, I was like, but he might not be like the overall villain. Because what I figured was going to happen in Kang Dynasty is they were going to set him up to be this ultimate big bad. And then like you'd have like a scene towards the end where Victor Von Doom, like, like you see his like hand go through him or something, or whatever he does to destroy one of them. And then he's just absorbing like all of their powers. And he becomes God King Doom, setting up Secret Wars after all the universes like collide into each other because of incursions and get destroyed. And she had that, and I was like, cool. I'm not the only one who thought that that would have been a really cool idea. Maybe they'll still do that. Who really knows? And because right now there's a lot of back and forth on the internet, and I keep hearing people go, people love this. People are going crazy for it. But I'm also seeing a lot of people that are very unhappy with it. And if you haven't heard, dun dun dun, spoiler alert, at Comic-Con, they revealed that Doctor Doom is going to be played by Robert Downey Jr., formerly known as Iron Man, Tony Stark in the MCU. And people have mixed feelings about it. People are confused how it's going to work. People are saying that it's genius. People are saying it's desperate. People are saying it's a disaster. And it could be all of those things. And my thing is, I'm fascinated to see what happens, because now Avengers Kang Dynasty, it became Avengers 5 because it didn't have a title anymore, which is why people thought that they were going to be moving away from Kang. And now it's called Avengers Doomsday, which is why they're like, hey, here's your Doom. And it's going to be setting things up for Secret Wars. So it's going to be, I'm just curious to see what they're going to do. And people, they always jump to being haters about things. But like they did it with Heath Ledger as the Joker. He's one of everybody's favorite Jokers. They did it with Robert Pattinson as Batman. I even did it. But I was willing to see, hey, let's see how he does. I'm curious to see what this rendition ends up looking like. Jesse Eisenberg, I thought that he was a terrible Lex Luthor, and he ended up being a terrible Lex Luthor. And it could go that way too. There's precedent for both, but there's way more precedent of people going, I don't like that actor playing that part, and then they loved it. Like people have to give these actors a chance. maybe it'll end up being this amazing storyline that rivals Infinity War and Endgame. And people go, what were we mad about again? Or maybe it'll be terrible. And maybe Marvel will never bounce back from it. And that's the problem, is like people were like, Deadpool and Wolverine gave me hope again. But now this is making me question the future of the MCU again. Oh no. It's like, just see what happens first. If it ends up sucking, I'll go, yeah, you're right. It was not a good move. But maybe it will be. And honestly, I'm of the same opinion as a lot of people that don't think that's going to ultimately be our last Doom. I don't think that, I feel like, and I've heard this bounced around on a couple different channels, they think that he's going to end up being the Doctor Doom for these movies. And then he's going to be gone. Because they're paying him. It's been apparently documented that the Russo brothers are going to be taking in $40 million each for these movies. But then Robert Downey Jr. is making even more than that. And there's a rumor that he could be making up to $100 million on each of these movies. I don't think they're going to keep doing that. So I think that this is a limited time thing. I don't think it's going to last. I think it explains, and this is my little Fortnite promo, I think that explains why Fortnite's next season is going to be a completely Marvel-themed season, and why we're probably going to get another version of Doom. And it'd be hilarious because people are already bouncing the memes around of, oh, my Tony Stark variant, he's got some different styles now that he didn't used to have. And it's just them joking, and they'll have like Dr. Doom on there now. So, we'll see what happens. I've always of the mindset, let's see. Like even Batman versus Superman, I hate that movie. And I was willing to give it a chance when I first heard about it, when I first went to go see it. And it ended up not being what I wanted. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to see. And like I said, I don't think this is going to end up being the final Doom. I think we'll end up with a different version of Doom that's not God King Doom. And this guy is just going to be like a one-off villain that's, whatever reason the story is calling for him to look like Tony Stark. I'm willing to see what happens. So, we'll see. I mean, I don't think 2024 is completely in bad hands. I mean, like I said, we have these movies still coming up. I mean, Craven's probably going to suck. I'm not a big musical fan, so I don't know how I feel about Wicked. I'm still rooting for Sony to fail, so Venom 3 looks like trash, honestly. Even if I didn't want them to fail. Borderlands feels a little like maybe they didn't learn the right lessons from Fallout. It feels a little Guardians of the Galaxy-ish. But I've never played Borderlands, so maybe that's the feeling that you're supposed to have. We'll see. There are some solid ones on here, though. Like, I'm pumped to see what the rest of this year brings. I mean, there's even some interesting TV coming up. The Batman Caped Crusader, I've heard really good things about. I'm curious to see what happens with Penguin. But there's some other ones, and then Agatha All Along. I think that's going to be solid. And before we get off here, I just wanted to point out, and I wish I would have made this video a very, very long time ago, because I said when they kept bouncing around all these different titles, when it was Coven of Chaos, when it was, I can't even remember. There was like 3 different titles that they bounced around. And I kept saying, I was like, it'd be wild is when this is all said and done, if it ended up being Agatha All Along, like the song in WandaVision. And then when they announced it, I was like, I really wish I would have made this video a very long time ago. But you know me, I like to procrastinate. So here we are in July. It's July 30th. We'll see what day this gets posted. Hopefully, I get a little more prompt and you guys can start to trust me and listen to my videos more often. But we'll see. Maybe this will just be a little passion that I do from time to time when I feel like making a voice blog about something. Vlog. Those are what those are called. I don't know why I just said it like that. So, like I said, we'll see what 2024 has to offer. I'm curious to see how much money Deadpool and Wolverine ends up making, because it's already doubled its budget in one weekend, which is bananas to me. Man, I really am curious to see how much money that movie makes. And I'm curious to see if Marvel finally bounces back, because I think DC is going to be strong. I really think under James Gunn's direction, DC's finally going to be the rival that they need them to be. And they can both up their games. And we can finally start getting really good superhero stuff. Because the TV stuff's been solid. Invincible and The Boys has been amazing forever. And those are both, The Boys is almost over with. I'm sure Invincible probably doesn't have too much left in it either. Like, we're getting ready to start, is this season 3 we're getting ready to come up on? So yeah, I mean, it'd be really awesome to see WB and it'd be really cool to see DC and Marvel both at new heights and seeing them both just delivering solid movie after blockbuster after blockbuster, and us just be eating good. And if you don't, well, then there's things like Doctor Who that'll come back and you can watch those. So until next time, we'll see what ends up happening. Talk to you later.